Welcome to the Mick, a Mook, and a Mike. Hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer Frank Mace and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guest, the famous MLB umpire Joe West, is back for our third anniversary show.
My brother Frankie, how are you? Do you believe it's 3 years?
Look at the tree. You got 3 years up there, and your middle finger. I don't know if you're giving me the middle finger or the middle finger. What's with the Band-Aid? What happened to you? Oh.
Sorry you asked. I lost a fight with a dog. Not a dog. I lost a fight with a can opener. I was opening a can of dog food, and I almost sliced my finger off. At 6:15, I came down, opened the dog food, and I did this, and I had to go to the emergency room. I had to get my wife up. She was all groggy. She's all groggy and shit, rocking and rolling. And I said, "You got to get me to the emergency room." 3 hours later, 7 stitches I had in my finger. It's unbelievable.
This happened to you this morning?
No, Billy, if it happened to me this morning, do you think I would be here now?
Frank, the show must go on. Don't you have people that do this stuff for you? Open up cans of food?
Not at 6 o'clock in the morning.
You don't have people that do that?
Yeah, no.
Wow, so 7 stitches, huh?
7 stitches.
Man, oh man.
So
3 hours later in the emergency room?
Yeah, so I was there I got there at 6:45, and I left at 3 hours later. 9:45.
They didn't know who you were.
But it's a good thing. Now I can.
3 years.
I can.
That thing's a little crooked too. Hold that thing up again.
Yeah, well, that's my goalkeeping days. They're all broken.
It's got a dog leg left. It's a par 4 anyway. That's a lot better than me. I got a par 3 here.
Yeah. So 3 years. Do you believe it?
No. Has it really been?
3 years in COVID.
Oh yeah.
We came through COVID. We came through social distancing where we were not in the same rooms.
The masks.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say congratulations to you guys, actually. And you should be very proud of yourselves. You made it this morning.
We did make it. We did make it for 3 years.
Yeah, no, this morning. This morning you made it. Because every day I get up, I wonder, is this the day?
Derek's got jokes.
Nice.
Derek's got jokes.
This is the day we bury these two old bastards.
Derek's got jokes.
This is the day we throw a couple of pails of dirt on them. How's that feel? What do you think of me now? Huh? How do you like that?
You got any good stories you haven't told us over the last 2 years or so? You got another one you can tell us?
Tell about the 3 guys that wanted to get a Guinness Book of Records.
Yeah. Tell us that.
What story is that?
But use Joe West as the kicker.
So these 3 guys, they want to get in the Guinness Book of Records, right?
I'm holding my breath.
Yeah, I'm sure. And one guy says, I used to be pretty fast in high school. Maybe I can get in as the fastest, 100-yard dash guy in the United States. The other guy says, I used to be a high jumper. I bet you I could probably jump higher than anybody in the United States. The other guy says, well, I don't have those kind of talents. But what I do got is I got a very small dick. Extremely small dick. I might have the smallest dick in the United States. So the 3 guys write into Guinness Book of World Records, and the envelopes come back, and the first guy says, I did it. Look at this. I'm in the Guinness Book. I can jump higher than anybody in the United States. And the guy says, look at me, man. I made it too. I can run faster in the 100-yard dash than anybody in the United States. And the third guy opens up his envelope and he goes, who the hell is Derek Harris?
Look at him, he's laughing.
Can you believe this, Joe?
Yeah. Well, why don't we bring on Joe and see what he thinks?
Joe, what do you think? I don't know.
Can you believe this?
He's going to use it, though.
I cannot believe that he said that about you, Derek.
Well,
the other day, Dave Casper told me a story about the 4 women's orgasms. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, what are the 4 women's orgasms? And he said, well, there's the positive orgasm where she goes, oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. Then there's the negative orgasm where she goes, oh no, oh no. Then there's the holy orgasm where she goes, oh my God. And then there's the fake orgasm where she goes, oh Billy.
I've had women say to me, wait a second, who the hell you think you're going to satisfy with that? And I always smile and say, me?
Yeah, that's right.
How you been, pal?
I've been doing good. I just came back from a 100-year fraternity reunion at Elon College. Well, it's now Elon University, but the fraternity that I was in when I was there, I was at their 50th one because I was still playing football. And then I just went to their 100th year reunion, and you're cutting your hand on that thing, old 7-stitch Frank there. Reminded me of a story that happened to our defensive lineman who was an All-American that year named Nick Angeloni. He was in a bar, and there was a machine over in the corner, a pinball machine, and if you had the highest score, you got to win a pitcher of beer. So he broke the glass so he could monitor the flippers at the bottom. And about halfway through the game, the machine shocked him and he jammed his thumb into the glass. And he's damn near bleeding to death there in the bar. And he had to go get stitches and all that at the hospital. And sure enough, he came back to practice the next day, and the football coach said, what happened? He said, I got in a fight with a pinball machine and I lost. Yep. And so, of course, the coach knew he'd been drinking. So he went and got a glass of water, a shot of bourbon, and a worm. And he put the worm in the glass of water. And, of course, the worm swam around from it and then climbed right out of the glass. And he put the worm in the glass of whiskey. And, of course, it just withered up and died. And he said, Nick, now what does that prove to you? And Nick Angeloni said, well, Coach, that means if I drink good whiskey, I won't ever get worms.
I got a story. I tell you that story, but I know you told you guys the story, but I tell you the story, Joe, about my father when he's fishing an island in Dingle. He always put a pint of whiskey between his legs. And he swore to God the story was true. He said he was fishing for trout in Ireland, and he always put a pint of whiskey. And one day he was fishing, and the worm fell into the whiskey. So he fished the worm out of the whiskey, and he put it on the hook, and he tossed it out. And he said, Billy, no sooner did the hook hit the bloody water, didn't I catch a 2-pound trout? He says, the thing was remarkable about it, he says, that the fish didn't really swallow the worm. The worm had the fish by the throat. Swear to God, up and down. Who is God now, Billy? I would never lie to you.
You never told us that story.
I think I told you that story. I never told Joe the story.
You never told me the story.
Well, don't take an umbrage against it. That's all I did.
You know what? When you get this age, you forget a lot of things. You forget whether you did or you didn't tell. So you got to remember that. You know, he might have thought he told you the story, Frank, but don't necessarily believe it. You know, anybody that lives on a boat instead of on dry land, you got to really worry about.
The most important thing when you're our age is never forget when you pass a men's room to use it. Make sure you use a men's room. Never pass one. That's the most important thing. Then we'll be in good shape.
In honor of the occasion today, Billy and I wore our Joe West shirts.
Yeah, I got one of mine on here. See,
we know it. Nice. I said blue, bright blue. Is that bright blue, Frank? You can't tell either.
I can't tell either.
Oh, you guys
Derek,
can't see that?
Bright blue.
No, I can see it. I can see
blue, right?
Well, can you see the difference between the collar and the shirt itself?
No.
Wow.
There's a difference.
Can you see that the shirt has stripes?
And these guys question my umpire. Can you believe that?
How many fingers am I holding up?
You know what I do question? I do question your handicap in golf because I think you went up to Connecticut and won another tournament. How many tournaments do you win?
Wow.
We just won our flight. We were second in the tournament.
Oh, excuse me, you just won our flight. And what did you win for that?
Well, we got
golf clubs.
No, we got $400 in cash for winning our flight.
I rest my case.
Wow.
But we got $960 for coming in second. But the funny thing was, when we got to the shootout, they didn't allow any handicaps. And of course, my partner and I questioned that. Well, why is that? He said, because the tee boxes you play from are determined by your handicap. So we got to play the forward tees, and we're playing these big hitters from the back. Of course, they still out hit us, but at least we were in the game, you know. So I thought it was kind of an interesting way to do the shootout. And when we played from the forward tees, the first par five, we were on in two, and then we three putted.
What is your what's the best? Let's say not what is your handicap. What's the best round of golf you ever shot?
I shot even par twice. Once
Really?
at Bonaventure Country Club and once at Bella Colina when I first started, and it was from the forward tees. I don't know what I was playing up there for, but probably should play there all the time. But yeah, I shot even par. I've never been under par. I've been under par on 9 holes before, but never 18. So
Just let one fall out.
Hey, Joe, let me ask you a question. It seems like the major league umpires are coming under fire more than ever with the automatic strike zone this year. It seems like if a pitch is 1 inch away from the automatic strike zone, all the announcers are freaking out. What's your take on that?
well, a big problem with that is the television networks aren't in sync with what the umpires are supposed to be calling. Like last year, I remember watching a game between the Cardinals and the Mets, and the same pitch was inside the strike zone on one feed, and it was outside the strike zone on another feed. So that's not as accurate as it should be. And you know who the very worst we had with that box was TBS. Theirs was never correct. Theirs was always off one way or another. But the big point is I don't care what the strike zone is. Just tell the umpires where it is, because you can't be second guessing them if they're calling what they're taught to call. And the other thing is that machine that tracks the umpire's grade and tracks his score doesn't always track the pitch. I know I've told you the story about Andy Fletcher where he came to me and he was complaining that the machine said he missed 6 pitches. And I said, well, how many did the machine miss? And he said it didn't track 14. And that's probably why they haven't gone to the machine already, because they can't get the machine to call every pitch. And I think the biggest problem is, like what you said, is the announcers are saying on the screen what they see. And what they see sometimes isn't accurate. But then again, every umpire's not going to get every pitch right. I mean, the other day I watched a game where Aaron Boone got kicked out, and he got kicked out on a pitch that was an obvious strike. And because the catcher caught it poorly, he complained to the umpire, and the umpire threw him out. And so, you kind of get what you pay for here. You can't. These catchers when they sit inside and then they throw the pitch on the outside corner, they have to reach for it, and that's why Boone argued. And Boone was absolutely wrong. Even the announcer said he was wrong, and the feed that they showed was the Yankees feed, and they agreed that the umpire got the pitch right.
Yeah, I think Booney said that the umpire did get the pitch right, but he was reacting. It seems like he was reacting to the pitch prior to that, which was was shown to be outside.
Well, that was a whole nother hitter too, and that hitter didn't even complain.
Yeah,
that hitter just walked away. So that should tell you something. I mean, and maybe it was outside, but the hitter that he called out prior to that never said a word. He just walked off.
And what's with framing pitches? I mean, how can umpires are not fooled by framing pitches?
No.
How can they grade catchers being a good framer or not a good framer when the umpire is obvious that the guy's catching the ball and he's moving it up?
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing, that the catchers that are very good at framing the pitches usually hurt the good pitches, because they show you if it's a good pitch or a bad pitch. A guy like Molina, when he called, he took away more pitches from his own pitchers than he helped them with, because he caught the ball where it was. He was great at that. And guys like Bench, who called the one and out in front of him, showed you where the pitch was. And I honestly believe Johnny Bench revolutionized catching, because he caught the ball out in front of him. and he caught it like a first baseman would catch the ball at first base. And the old time catchers like Yogi Berra and those guys, they used that mitt that had one little hole in the middle of it, and they had to catch the ball almost with both hands just to catch it. But Bench had revolutionized the game because his catcher's mitt was as big as a first baseman's mitt and had a little more padding. And he could catch with one hand. In fact, he did because he put his right hand behind him so he didn't get hit with a foul tip.
Yeah, you bring up a point. Let's talk about. I've noticed that catchers very recently, in the last year or so, are starting to catch with their knee on the ground, and I'm seeing a lot of pass balls because they unable to move. Am I seeing things, or
No, that's a mistake. I mean, usually the old time catchers didn't catch with a knee on the ground with anybody on base. But some of these guys are doing it today to try to get down as low as they can to try to get a pitch. But I think that's a mistake. You know, I only saw a couple catchers who could throw from the knees and really do anything. And one of them was Bench, and he didn't do that. And one of them was Benito Santiago, and Pudge Rodriguez could do it. But for the most part, if you can't throw anybody out from that position, why would you ever get in that position? It's not smart. So
and if you can't move to get a pass ball, I mean,
you're hurting your own pitching. That's right.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was Bench that started the trend of catchers catching the ball out in front of them. But you make a great point about the old gloves. When Yogi and those guys had gloves, you had to catch it with two hands. It was like a pie plate, those gloves, right?
Yep. Yep. They didn't have a hinge in it where you could close it. You had to almost cradle the ball as it came in. So not only that, that was hard for the umpire to see over you because the catcher actually moved closer to home plate when he caught like Berra. And Bench sat back where you could see the ball come over the plate. So that was a difference too.
so 50 years ago this month, you were at Elon College preparing to play college football. Is that right?
Well, yeah, 50 years ago, yeah, that's exactly right. That was my last year. And that was the year that we went to the national championship game in Shreveport, Louisiana. And we got beat by an Abilene Christian team. They had a guy named Clint Longley and a running back named Wilbur Montgomery. And if you think Wilbur Montgomery ran good for the Eagles, you should have seen him run against us.
And you were a quarterback back then, right? You were QB?
Yeah, I set the record for most completions in a game that day. Because we didn't really have to throw the ball back then because we were 12-0 going into that game. And I set the record for the school for the most completions in a game. And, when I played football in college, I felt like if I played a good game, that we couldn't lose. Well, I played a good game that day, and we got killed.
One of the reasons I would imagine you set the record for completions, you were behind so far, you had to throw every goddamn down, I would think.
You're exactly right. We got behind, and we had to play catch up the whole day. So that was the reason I set the completion record. It wasn't anything spectacular, but yeah, I had a great football team. And that story I told you about the defensive lineman that cut his hand, he was the captain of that football team. And I can remember when we were preparing to go to Shreveport, the football coach came to us and he says, we can only take, I think it was 54 or 56 guys. And we dressed out 80 players. We dressed out all the players that were in practice with us every game. And when they told us that the other 30-some guys couldn't go, I told Nick, I said, they're going to go, Nick. And he said, what do you mean? He said, they're not allowed to go. I said, they might not be allowed to go, but they can certainly go as the team. They can certainly go on the team bus. That's wrong. And he said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, they practiced with us. They sweated with us. They bled with us all practices all year long. And you're telling me they're not allowed to go to the championship game? And he said, well, what should we do? I said, you go tell Red Wilson, who was the head coach, that if they don't go, we're not going. And he did. And they took all 80, some of them. They took everybody on the team. So I kind of relate that to my first tenure of labor negotiations.
I got a question.
Spread the numbers.
That's a great story. I have a question about your time as a football player. Was there hazing?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
and it was bad.
Really?
I remember, I remember the last night of the hazing for getting into the fraternity. They took me and this baseball player, Turner Rebels, out on a road trip. They blindfolded us and took us out on a road trip, just dumped us out in the country somewhere. We walked about 5 or 10 minutes and found a gas station, and he had hidden a dime in his shoe. That's how much a phone call cost back then, was a dime. And so he's calling somebody he knew to come pick us up, and he didn't even know where we were. And I went over, and there was a pickup truck over there with one of those extended things on the key that you used to put in. And I cranked the pickup truck up, and I said, "Get in the truck, let's go." So I drove the truck back to the fraternity house, and then we had to get somebody to help take the truck back. So the guys that took us out there weren't back yet. they were all having a beer somewhere, so we beat them back to the fraternity house.
Wow.
And, yeah, there was hazing back then. Don't ever let anybody tell you there wasn't.
My freshman year at Jacksonville, they took all the freshman soccer players out to the sand dunes in Ponte Vedra and stripped us down to our shorts and made us run the sand dunes and then left us there. So we had to find our way back to the campus, which was about 18 miles or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think any time a group of men get together in a confined, you're going to get hazing. I mean, people are going to break each other's balls. That's the deal. In the Army, they do the same thing. If a guy smelt a little bad, they give him a GI bath. You know what a GI bath is? They catch you, scrub you down with Brillo. 8, 9 guys would be scrubbing a guy down with Brillo. I mean, that's hazing to a whole new level. I mean,
Yep, for sure.
So you really smelled bad when you were in the service.
Billy O'Connor, B.O., the initials, B.O., body odor. It was a double prong, Play
Well,
words.
now they're paying the college athletes for their likeness, and it looks like that Archie Manning's grandson, his likeness is selling so well. He's already guaranteed $1 million before he gets out of school.
Yeah.
And,
and he's getting $1 million, and he's not even starting.
yeah, and the funny thing is, I met with the chancellor of Elon College, and she asked me a question because she knew that I had dealt with the Major League Baseball issues about licensing and stuff. And she said, "Do you think it's fair that a school has to pay an athlete for his likeness?" I said, "Yes, if you use it to promote your school. You're not entitled to steal his likeness for no reason." I mean, and she said, "Well, we'll give him a scholarship." I said, "You did that on your own before. That has nothing to do with using his likeness as a promotion." She wasn't too tickled with what I had to say, but because a smaller school like that doesn't want to pay the athlete for that, but a bigger school, they can afford it. The alumni pays it. I can remember talking to Wimp Sanderson, who was the basketball coach at Alabama, and I said, "Wimp, if you were such a good coach, why didn't you get Charles Barkley?" He said, "I couldn't afford the car." So they've been doing this for a long time.
Yes, but now they're doing it legally, and now I think with the investiture of the USC and UCLA into the Pac-12, into the Big Ten, and then Oregon and Washington follow, I believe that they're going to put smaller schools out of the picture, because if you're going to have 50 or 60 top football and basketball schools, and the non-revenue producing sports, they're going to also have to play. UCLA will have to go to Rutgers to play women's crew or women's soccer or men's volleyball, and those kids are real true athletes, are true student athletes, and they're going to miss time away from school, and it's really going to hurt them. It's really going to hurt them. So I believe a school like Elon is never going to compete in Division One for anything other than local glory. I mean, why? I think you're going to see some schools like Elon, like Jacksonville, like Georgia Southern drop down to Division Three if they may have to, just in order to stay competitive. I mean, just to draw student athletes. I mean, because with the transfer portal, if you're good at Jacksonville in basketball, if you're really good at Jacksonville in basketball, you're going to transfer out. You're going to transfer to a bigger school. So I mean, it's all it's all about competitiveness now. It's no longer about who's got the biggest locker room or who's got the best uniform. It's who's going to give me the most money in football and basketball.
Well, you could say that, but I mean, you take Artis Gilmore, who's your friend. I mean, he played at Jacksonville, and before I got to Elon, they had a tight end named Richard McGeorge who had a great NFL career. And
But
so,
that was 50, 52 years ago. I'm talking about now. The landscape has changed within the last year. And I,
well, and that's because the NCAA's let it change.
but the
And
NCAA no longer controls college basketball or college football. The TV networks control college basketball and football.
Can
now.
I ask a question?
Yeah.
So just so I understand this. So are you? Maybe I'm not familiar with this. So the schools have to pay the athletes, or I thought the athletes just have the ability to make money outside the school, or is it both?
no, the school doesn't pay them. The licensing department of what they're doing has to pay them because if if you take, for example, if you take your likeness and they put it, and some company puts it out there for profit, you're entitled to compensation for them using your likeness. And that's a law that's covered under what they call the Lanham Act. And the Lanham Act protects anybody from using your likeness without permission. And you get to negotiate what that would be. So in today's market, the colleges have been put on notice that if they use a player's likeness, whether it be basketball, baseball, football, whatever, uh, without their permission, they could be sued. So they have to compensate the athlete for using his likeness. It'd be like
Got it.
if O.J. Simpson's at USC
Great choice.
and they want to use him to promote USC football, they should have to pay him. And for years, they didn't have to pay him, and they abused the privilege of using that player's likeness.
yes, but now as a recruiting tool, the schools negotiate NIL licenses on behalf of the kids, and
Exactly.
they deliver the kids like the quarterback at SC Caleb Williamson now is going to probably make $8 million in NIL money this year to play quarterback for USC. Most of those deals have been negotiated by two or three companies that one officially represents USC. So I mean, if Caleb Williamson gets $8 million, the backups or the long snapper, they may make a deal for the long snapper for $50,000 for his name, image, and likeness. So the school can offer that long snapper a $50,000 to come to USC in name, image, and likeness, and it goes all the way down the lineup.
So it's a matter of celebrity. So
It's a matter of celebrity
okay, and draw.
and draw.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the logic of schools being relegated now to nothingness because of athletes.
Two things: the transfer portal,
Okay.
whereas the schools have coaches that simply look at the transfer portal every day, and if they're looking for a great star at Elon basketball, a great star at Jacksonville basketball,
Okay.
a great star at Stetson basketball, and if they think they can move up, they'll convince that person to put his name in the transfer portal, and then that guy can transfer to Ohio State or a school that's got NIL money.
Okay, so I'm sorry I had to take over this thing, but so what's the difference between that? So meaning the schools had that, well, they didn't have the portal before, but they did have the ability to miss a year and transfer, right? So if they found if said coach decided that he liked a guy in southern Mississippi that was at a small school, he still had the ability to do that.
He could do it subtly, but now he can do it officially.
Okay.
And there, the numbers in the transfer portals, and I can't really tell you, but I think there's like 800 Division I athletes went in the transfer portal for basketball last year. I think I made up that number, but just to give you an idea. No, I mean to give you an idea of the scope of the problem.
Got it.
Well, you're talking about 8. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, the Major League Baseball umpires, we negotiated a licensing package for them so that baseball could use us in their advertising. And every umpire gets, I think it's $15,000 a year, which is not enough, but it's certainly a piece to welcome that baseball has to pay you to use your likeness in a commercial and use your likeness in an ad.
How much of that was FTX money?
Oh gosh, you know what was a mess with that? That FTX thing was crazy. They were paying the charity $100,000 a year, the umps care charity that we had. They paid them $100,000, and they gave every umpire except the minor league umpires that wore the FTX logo. They gave us $1,000 in cryptocurrency. So it was funny because I couldn't open the portal to do anything with it. So I called FTX and had them try to show me how to do it. They couldn't open it. I said, okay, just send me $1,000. And they said, well, the stock is down. It's only probably worth $800. I said, no. The deal was $1,000. And you can't open it, and I can't open it. So send me a check. They actually sent me a check for $1,000. And Rita said, it's the most proud I've ever been of you for not being able to be technically able to do something.
Unintended consequences. Yeah. So but tell me now, and I had no idea. You're talking about $8 million a year for a college quarterback. He might be getting.
That's what he's been quoted.
So I mean, you got to be out of your mind not to get in on that money, right? I mean, there's no guarantee you're going to stay healthy enough to get in the pros. I mean, every college in America, I would think if I'm a good college ball player at a small school, I'm going to say, yeah, get me in on that piece of the pie. I got to be nuts not to.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I think you're right.
That's why the small schools will suffer in the end.
Well,
before it's all over, it'll be like the Yankees being compared to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's never going to be the New York Yankees. So they have to do something else to get their players. Now, most of baseball's making enough money so that they can afford the players. So that doesn't necessarily happen to them. But in a market where you're competing against schools that don't have the big alumni like the big schools and don't have the support money and the support staff, those big schools would dominate. I mean, when I was going to college at East Carolina and then Elon, Ohio State, every athlete in their school had a scholarship. Every athlete at the school had a scholarship. And so they had to make rules where Ohio State couldn't give every athlete a scholarship. So they had to cut back their scholarships. Well, who got hurt? The athletes, not the school.
Right.
It saved the school money. So people still wanted to go to Ohio State, but everybody couldn't go there on a scholarship. So now it's got to the point where you can remedy that, and the fact that you only have 40 scholarships to give out to certain schools doesn't affect them anymore. So that's part of the growing concern.
You mentioned East Carolina. You started at East Carolina and then you transferred to Elon, correct?
Yeah, I was recruited by Mike McGee, and Mike McGee was the head coach at East Carolina 1 year. In fact, when he recruited me, he sat down with my mom and dad and he said, I'll give your son full scholarship, room and board and so on and so on, books and this, that, and that. And my mother said, just a minute. You're going to give my son free meals. I don't have to pay for his meals. And McGee said, well, yes, ma'am. And she looked at me and pointed right at me and said, you will play football.
You know, when I was at Jacksonville, we went up to East Carolina to play them in soccer. And one of the things was that East Carolina, one of the perks, I guess, for our coach was that East Carolina was going to put us up. We didn't have to pay for any of our expenses. They were going to put us up. Little did we know that we were in the bowels underneath the football stadium in in bunk bed barracks was where they put us up. We were not pleased with our coach, that's for sure, because we're used to staying in, Motel 6.
Motel,
Yeah, well, even if it was a Motel 6, it was still a hotel. When we walked down into the bowels of East Carolina Stadium, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Joe, it was a rude awakening, that for sure.
That was the little town I grew up in, Greenville, North Carolina.
Well,
And
go ahead.
to
Sorry.
build that stadium, they went to the city and asked them if they'd build the stadium. And the response was, yes, if you let the high school team play their home football games there. So I played my home football games there as a high school quarterback. And the teams would love to come in and play us because they're getting to play in a big college stadium. So they'd come in and half of them would be just looking around because they'd never seen anything like it. And that's where we played our home games as high schoolers. And the grass was like walking on a carpet. It was just beautiful. And then when East Carolina realized that if you play a Friday night high school game there and it's a little wet or a little muddy, those kids will tear up the field just like the collegiates will. And it didn't take them long to kick the high school team out.
Yeah.
So
once the stadium was built, the deal changes.
yeah, once it was up and it was already paid for, it was gone. So
well, you mentioned Greenville. We had the best meal I think ever at a little roadside place in Greenville where we all ordered beef tips. None of us had ever heard of beef tips before, but we had a great beef tip dinner in Greenville, Greenville, North Carolina. Not to be confused with Greenville, South Carolina, which was where Furman was.
That's right. Yeah, there's probably a Greenville in every state.
There's one in Mississippi.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a Greenville in almost every state. But yeah, that. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that the baseball program in Greenville went from what they call small fry to big fry to little league aides that didn't make little league, and I used to work for the recreation department when I'd come home from school in the summer, and those kids they're actually playing the little league women's softball in that stadium where I played as a little leaguer right now. And I think ESPN is carrying on the air. But
is that where you started umpiring, Joe, in the Greenville Little League?
Yeah.
How old were you?
The first game I worked was because one of the parents didn't show up. And this guy named Bill Cowerway said, well, let Joe umpire the bases. He can do it. I was 12 years old, playing in the same league they asked me to umpire the bases in.
Wow. 12 years
so I umpired the bases for one game, and nothing really happened. You just call them out or safe or whatever, kind of like I tried to do as a big leaguer. But that was the first game I ever worked. It was at Guy Smith Stadium, Little League Park.
What was the first game you ever got paid to umpire?
Oh, it was probably years later when I was in college. They'd give us, I think we started at $7 a game. And before I got out of college, I was working college games. But and the college gig was pretty good because I used to play spring football and then I'd go umpire the local Legion and high school games. And you got $17 or $25 a game. That paid for a keg of beer back then. So.
Well, you played a couple of games of golf scratch. I imagine you're a pretty low handicap. You set a record in pro.
He's not as low a handicap as he should be.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
Well, yeah, but what's the motivation? What's the impetus? What's to improve just for your own personal gratification? It's obviously he's not going to be on a tour. You know what I mean? It's like you doing sit-ups. What are you doing sit-ups for? Nobody gives a shit the way you look. Most guys your age are dead. What the fuck are you doing sit-ups? But were you a good baseball player too? What position did you play?
Well, I caught, and that's why the football coach at Elon wouldn't let me play on the baseball team. He didn't want me hurting my hands as a catcher, so he wouldn't let me play on the baseball team when spring practice was over. And, so I would go umpire, and I'll never forget I was umpiring this high school game. The director of umpires for the Carolina League was there. And he pulled me aside after it was over. He said, if you're going to do this, you ought to learn how to do it the right way. And so he took me some clinics and he showed me little things about you take your mask off with your left hand. You hold your indicator in your left hand. There's a proper way to take your mask off so your hat doesn't fall off and cover your face. And you don't really think that's a big deal until you got to play at home plate and you pull your mask off and the hat's blocking your vision. But so when I went to umpire school 3 years later, I was ahead of all those kids because I was umpiring the way they did in the Carolina League before I became a professional umpire. And that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me was meeting that guy. And he took an interest in how to improve yourself, in the beginning. And if you don't have any bad habits when you start, it makes it easy because most of the kids at umpire school, you had to break the bad habits that they were doing to start with. And it took them a little while. But I used to stand in front of a mirror and practice taking my mask off. And my brother thought I had completely lost my mind. but
It worked.
But anyway.
It worked. I have a couple questions for you guys. So, can you guys tell me a time in your life? You guys are all, accomplished fellows. You have a lot of experience, and you have had some. You've had some success in your life. Can you tell me a time in your life where you should have turned right, but you turned left?
I'll go. I was in a World Football League, and I was trying to be a publicist. World Football League I was losing my job for the third time through no fault of myself. My third team I was with was folding. I got a call. I was with Chicago at the time. I got a call from a gentleman by the name of Salty Saltwell, who was the general manager at the time of the Chicago Cubs, to come in and interview for the Chicago Cubs publicist job. I went and interviewed in a game that Rennie Stennett went 7 for 7. And I just it was a crazy game. It was like 21-7. It was the Cubs and the Pirates. But then I decided I just didn't want to be in sports anymore. So I came back to California and I got a job at a public relations firm, and it changed my life. So there was a time I took the road less traveled.
But that was a good zig instead of a zag.
Yeah.
I can think of playing golf with a guy who was a dentist, a Jewish dentist, retired in Miami.
Now, why is he got to say Jewish?
Because he was a Jewish dentist.
Oh, okay.
He just happened to be a Jewish. Like, he was a tall dentist. He was a short dentist. He was a fat. He was a Jewish dentist. And the guy says to me he was buying some land. And I said, me too. And he said, where you buy the land? He said, Vancouver Island. I said, that sounds like a good spot, but I'm going to buy land in New Orleans. And that was like a week before Katrina. And I bought the land exactly when Katrina landed. As a matter of fact, I remember I was worried about Katrina, and I said to my girlfriend, who was obviously, computer savvy, I wasn't, and I said, well, you're tracking the storm. I said, I see the storm. I see the eye of the storm. I see the front, but I don't see my land. She goes, it's underneath the storm. I said, oh. And that was, I went down there about a week later. There was cars and trees, it was a disaster. As a matter of fact, it just last week came back to the price that I bought the lots at.
Wow.
So that's
You still got the land?
Yeah, we got 3 lots left out of 11. But it just got back to you could have took a dot and thrown it in the map of the world, never mind the United States, and there's no way real estate hasn't appreciated in 20 years at any other spot except for where I bought that land.
Why do I think that's the story of your life?
That's my whole life. Zig when you should zag. Zag when you should zig. How about you, Joe?
The other lots are underwater, right?
Yep.
Well, you know what? the lots were 3 feet above sea level, which in New Orleans is like Mount Sinai. I'm serious. It was huge because at least when the flood came in, the water dissipated. But there was like about 6 houses built. They were all in the trees. You know, the supermarket was gone. The town was gone. It was disaster. How about you, Joe? When you zig when you should have zagged, or zag when you should have zigged?
When I was in the big leagues a couple of years, I bought a house on Bayview, which is a waterfront place in eastern North Carolina. And it had a bulkhead. It had a 300-foot pier that went out into the Pamlico River. And at the end of the pier, the water was only about 4 feet deep. That's why the pier was out so far, so that you could pull a boat up to the dock. And I didn't have the place probably a month when Hurricane David hit. And the wind and waves that came in blew about 40% of the slats on the pier off. So I come back after the storm and I'm looking, and my pier's almost gone. The standers, the pilings were there, and the runners were there, but the slats that covered the top, I'm thinking, I can't afford to replace them. So I didn't think much about it. And the next day I go back, and all but 4 of the slats that covered the top of the pier were in my yard in 3 stacks. And I couldn't figure out, how did they know they were my boards? So my next door neighbor came over and I asked him the same question. He said, because all your slats have a red dot on the bottom of them, so that we know they're yours. I didn't know that when I bought the place, but I got all my slats back except 4, I think it was, and went out and just tapped them on. So I had my pier back, and it was amazing. But the storm had washed away a lot of the front of the bulkhead, so I had to rebuild the bulkhead, and I actually went in with gravel and rocks and built that back up, so that didn't happen again. But that was, I mean, it was one of those things where, here's my new house. This is great. And now this big expansion.
My new old house.
My new house.
Yeah. You got something?
Well, I'm going to change the subject. So
Okay.
If you want.
No, you go ahead.
So, Joe, what did you think of the Barbie movie?
I haven't seen the Barbie movie, and I don't know that I'm going to see it.
Why did I?
You know, you actually believe that I would go watch that, huh?
No, I believe that absolutely. I would have been shocked if you said you had. Have you seen any movies?
Not lately. You know, I play golf with a guy who was a Top Gun fighter pilot, and he said that Maverick movie was the most authentic movie he's ever seen about air warfare and flying. He said he could actually feel in his bones whenever they made a turn. He said I could feel the G-forces when they were doing it. He said he thought it was the most authentic aircraft movie he'd ever seen, and he was tickled. He said it was better than the first one. So I take his word for it. I saw it and I thought it was a good movie. It's a cute story, you know, but a lot of it's Hollywooded up like they were never going to survive that, but they did.
Yeah.
No,
So,
that's for sure.
I got another question for you guys. Actually, a series of questions. So I pulled up the most notable figures of the '60s, and I want to ask you from this list of people if they are hero or zero. Okay. So this guy may be out of the '60s, but I'm going to throw him in there anyway. So the first guy is Winston Churchill. Hero or zero?
If you're an American, obviously he's a hero. If you're Irish, you don't really feel like that because the Brits were brutal to the Irish under Churchill. You know, they had the black and tans. They emptied out all their prisons and sent them over to the Irish to solve the Irish problem. You know, and they were murderers, rapists. You know, but if you're American, yeah, and I mean, don't forget, Winston Churchill's mother was an American. She was born here.
Yeah, I defer to you on that one. You have
Belmont.
You have more knowledge than me. I just know what I read in the history books.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
it's-
I'd say double-edged sword, depending on where you're from.
Hero and zero.
Yeah.
Joe.
Well, one thing about Churchill, this lady chewed him out one day because he was drunk. He's smoking his cigar and he's half drunk and everything. And she said, "You're a miserable, sloppy drunk." And he looked her right in the eye and pulled his cigar out and he says, "Yeah, but after a good night's sleep, I'll be over it, and you'll still be ugly tomorrow."
That makes him a hero in my book.
Lady Astor. Matter of fact, Lady Astor, there was another great quote of Churchill's from Lady Astor, where she said, "Mr. Churchill, I don't care for your mustache nor your politics." And he said, "Madam, it's unlikely you'll come in contact with either."
Next.
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther
He
King.
was he was an awesome man, but he had great upbringing. His dad, when that guy shot him, said, "I pray for the man that shot my son because his soul needs to be saved." And his dad was later executed too, I think. But Martin Luther King had enough intestinal fortitude to stand up to things that weren't right in this country. And even when he met the resistance that was just overbearing and overwhelming, he still stood up and fought back. And I give him a lot of credit for making people follow his lead. He helped. Of course, he got a lot of help from guys like Jackie Robinson and Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Jimmy Brown, but he was the true leader in standing up for what he believed was right.
Yeah, I would have to say hero. I mean, you can't say anything less than hero.
You can.
Oh, you can if you feel like that, but I don't feel like that. I mean, if nothing else, you read letters from a Birmingham jail, and that's an amazing piece of rhetoric. I mean, that's just brilliant.
And I think what Derek is referring to is what Billy would say: a small fault in a good man.
No, I wasn't
I
referring to that. I was saying that people have different opinions. So if Billy feels like he's a zero in his book, that's fine. It's okay. You can say that.
No, he did.
No, I
No.
think Martin Luther
I'm just
King. I
messing with
mean, it's like when we had Commander David Scott on. He said, "Just make sure you call me Commander." I said, "Well, I think he's earned that."
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think Martin Luther King has certainly earned, like you said, the courage of his. He had to know he was going to get killed or assassinated
Yeah.
at some time. I mean, he
I
had
think
to know.
I think he was like Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Same way.
Yeah.
Malcolm X was a charismatic leader who knew he was going to get killed.
Yeah, he knew it was inevitable that he was going to get assassinated.
Which is that's big balls. John F. Kennedy.
My impression of JFK, I mean, obviously after a man is killed in '62, when he was killed, after that he was a saint, but
63.
'63, excuse me, November of '63, right? He was a saint, but in the 1,000 days that he was elected president, that he was in office, he really didn't get a lot accomplished. I mean,
No, he
really didn't. LBJ got a ton accomplished after his assassination because on the wave of his, on the chagrin about his death. But I mean, I think he was a fairly decent president. I don't think he was as good a president as Eisenhower was. I think Eisenhower was a great president.
So hero is zero.
Well, I don't think that's too dramatic to say hero is zero. Can I say
Well,
50-50?
Yeah, history has been rewritten by his assassination. Obviously,
Without a doubt.
his assassination changed the course of Vietnam. It changed the course of a lot of things. So I think if he had lived, he could have been a hero.
And there's a lot of revisionist history. They say that he definitely would have got us out of Vietnam. I don't see anything in his that would have happened. I mean, actually, if anything,
Well,
when
yeah,
Nixon,
he was trying to get us out of Vietnam, and the Bay of Pigs probably got him killed because Vietnam was a moneymaker for the United States. It was the largest and the best grade of rubber in the world was in Vietnam. And everybody says we were in Vietnam because of stopping communism. That's not true. The reason we were in Vietnam was because of the rubber. We use more rubber than anybody else in the world. That's why we were there. And anybody tells you the difference, lying to you.
well, they always sell the war on we're looking to stop communism, we're looking to stop this, but it's always about economics. And there was rubber, and there's also some of the things that we use in computers was also they were rich in Vietnam.
Yeah, but the Bay of Pigs got Kennedy killed because I don't believe a foreign entity killed him. I believe it was our own people, and I think it's sad to look at that situation like that because the Bay of Pigs, he left people on the beach down there in Cuba,
Yeah.
Cap. So that was a bad thing, but that was a tactical mistake that he made without information that he should have had.
Yep.
So I believe what he did on PT 109 and what he did by trying to get us out of Vietnam, I think he was a hero. I really do. Did he make mistakes? Yeah, well, everybody does. But some of his mistakes are magnified, just kind of like that outside pitch that the announcer thinks, "Oh, that's outside, so I'm going to lamb blast this umpire." You know, he made a mistake at the Bay of Pigs, and I'm not so sure he didn't make a lot of mistakes in the White House because there's all these rumors about him and Marilyn Monroe. But
small fault in a good man.
Marilyn Monroe, you can see how a guy can make that mistake. That could be a wrong turn you can make. Oh, well, you know.
I wish we were drinking. Go ahead, Frank.
Next.
Wish we were drinking in this game because, well, anyway. Lyndon Johnson, who you guys mentioned earlier. These are hard, right?
No, I think Lyndon Johnson's a much maligned hero.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he was a much maligned hero and that he really wanted to do the right thing for poverty in this country. His war on poverty was legit. He grew up without electricity. I mean, LBJ was a country boy, you know, and he grew up. I think he was Vietnam destroyed all his ambitions. You know, I mean, all his legacy. It really had a.
But he was a hero because of what he did for civil rights and
poverty.
Poverty. He was a hero in my book.
Well, he picked up where Kennedy was on civil rights.
Yes.
He picked up where Kennedy was on civil rights. He realized that was a losing proposition to not carry on that banner because that was a great thing for the whole country. But he escalated the war in Vietnam. A lot of people don't realize that. And there was one thing that came out about the Kennedy assassination that I really have always questioned, and it was that he told Governor Connally, "You don't want to get in that car." Because Connally got in the car with the Kennedys. And I always wondered what that was about. And Connally got shot that day, as did Kennedy. But that was one thing I always questioned about him. It was as if he knew something was coming. So I would say he was one of the most successful presidents at what he did, but he did it as a politician. I'm not so sure he was a hero as much as everyone would make him out to be. So,
good discussion. Derek, next.
Nikita Khrushchev.
Nikita Khrushchev. Well, that's one of the reasons, from what I've read in history anyway, that we really got into Vietnam is because Khrushchev had given Kennedy in their first encounter alone. Kennedy came out of like a 2-hour meeting where Khrushchev just berated him. And Khrushchev, of course, at the UN when he was banging his shoe and everything else, he was a World War I hero, Khrushchev. I mean, he was fought with the Russians, you know, and against that occupation. And he thought Kennedy was too young and soft. And when Kennedy came out of that first meeting with Khrushchev,
he wanted to prove his strength.
He put a fedora down on his head and he sat down. I think it was Teddy Sorensen, I think, who probably wrote more about Profiles in Courage than Kennedy did. You know, Kennedy took the bow for writing Profiles in Courage, but Teddy Sorensen, probably, who was a good friend of his, probably had more to do with writing that book. I said to him, "Mr. President, rough time in there?" And he looked up and he said, "About as rough as it gets." And he said, "Where is it going on right now?"
And he said, "Vietnam."
He said, "What do you mean, where's what going on?" He says, "The communists, where are they?" He says, "Right now, it's Vietnam." He says, "Well, we got to make a stand there because this guy thinks I'm soft, and he can't think I'm soft." And that's what the conversation was. Joe, I don't know if you want to add to that or whatever. But.
Well, he's the guy that made the statement, "We'll take you over without firing a shot."
That's right.
You will keep giving stuff away, and you will finally be outnumbered by those that you're giving stuff to instead of making them work for it. And he said, socialism will take over your country because when they realize they can outvote you, they will. And he made that statement in the 60s.
Go order ran on that. He told LBJ, if a man says he's going to bury you, you don't hand him a shovel.
And then Goldwater got buried.
Yeah, he got
In the
buried
election.
in the other. Well, that's when the Democrats,
Yeah,
and LBJ with the child with the explosion,
Yeah.
and of course, LBJ was supposed to keep us out of Vietnam. He was going to be, and Goldwater was a warmonger according to the Democrats. And,
Well, you have to look at the politics back then. Back then, the Democrats were the conservative party.
yeah, without a
The,
doubt.
the Republicans were the liberal party back then, and it's completely flopped now. So
And you could go back to the Civil War. It was the same thing. The Republicans were the Democrats, and the Democrats were the Republicans.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Okay, next guy is Chairman Mao.
Chairman Mao. I was in China, I guess about 8-9 years ago, and I had a Chairman Mao T-shirt, just a picture of Chairman Mao, and I got 10 of them. And the only reason I got so many was because I was going to break my friend's balls on a sailboat. I was going sailing with a bunch of firemen, and I was always like, the guy, the liberal guy, with the firemen are pretty right wing usually, especially in New York. And so I was going to wear my Chairman Mao shirt, and I was going to wear one every day when I was on sailboat. But when I was on with the Chairman Mao shirt, I went to hail a cab, and this guy come flying over about 19 lanes. China was just like every man for himself. If they're in the right-hand lane, they want to go left, they just make a left. They don't care if they're crossing 20. And this guy pulls up in front of me. Great leader, he says. Great leader, and he's pointing to Chairman Mao. What he did was remarkable, the march. But hero or zero, I guess if you're Chinese, you got to say hero.
Hero, and if you're American, you probably
got to say zero, I guess,
Yeah. Interesting.
Joe, how do you feel about that? Chairman
I
Mao.
think we give the Chinese too much credit. They're watching what we do and they copy it.
It's a lot of that.
Yeah. So I don't like his politics. I've never liked it where the people don't have any say. And what was the square where they ran over the students?
Tiananmen Square, yeah.
I'm not. I can't say that I appreciate or like any of that. So.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about this is it says under his, just brief bio, it says he presided over a deadly famine. In 1966, he initiated a cultural revolution, which led to unprecedented censorship. So,
Well, if you want to put it that way, then if you asked any German in the world what they thought of Adolf Hitler, they would say that under his leadership, more goods and services were created while Adolf Hitler was in charge of Germany than any other time in their history. Yeah. And yet, he was a vindictive, miserable, masochist. He was terrible. Yet, they produced more goods and services while he was in power in Germany than any time in their existence. And a lot of people don't realize that. They built highways. They built a war machine. They had, in a small country like that, shouldn't have been able to take over all of Europe, and they did. If the Brits and the Americans didn't go in there, all those people over there would be speaking German. So, I compare Mao to this guy, to Hitler.
Yeah.
So I don't like either one of them.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah. Charles de Gaulle.
Le Grand Charles, huh? Le Grand Charles. Well, I remember in '67 when they threw us out of France. We had aircraft. Still had Air Force bases over there. When they threw us out of France, my brother was stationed in Chambly Air Force Base, and they ripped up all the runways. We didn't leave nothing, not a building, nothing, not even two slabs on top of each other. But again, if you're French in World War II, I guess Le Grand Charles is. If you're American, he was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking more zero than hero.
Yeah. How do you feel about him, Joe? De Gaulle.
I thought he was useless.
Yeah.
The story you always hear is 1,000 French rifles for sale, only dropped once.
That's a great one.
Okay, I don't know this guy, but Willy Brandt.
Willy Brandt,
Willy Brandt, Germany.
Germany,
Yeah.
Willy Brandt.
I don't know anything about him. So you guys got anything?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about Willy Brandt since I saw his name as Chancellor of Germany. I don't know that much about him.
Yeah.
I don't know how successful
We'll go to the
he
next
was.
guy. You want to move on?
Yeah, I would like to move on.
Of course. Hold on. Let me find the freaking camera. Okay.
I would like to move on.
Wait, let me do one more. Let me do two more.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. We don't have to.
No, go ahead.
I know you're hurting over there.
Go ahead.
Fidel Castro.
Wow, that's a real mixed bag, Castro. Again, if you're an American, he's a pain in the ass. I guess what he did for his people, he suppressed a lot of people and he broke a lot of eggs to make his omelet. He speaks English very well.
I know he's speaking.
Fidel.
He went to college in the States.
That's right.
Do you know the story, however, that he was a pitcher, and
Yes.
he was a great pitcher, and he had a tryout for the major leagues, and he didn't make it because his fastball was not sharp enough, and his curveball didn't break enough. So had he been a good enough pitcher, he maybe wouldn't have been what he became.
Huh.
That was the whole focus of the pilot of Head of the Class.
Oh.
Is that right?
Yep.
Huh.
Yep.
The family that was running Cuba at the time was the Batista family,
Uh-huh.
and most of them settled in eastern North Carolina when they left. In fact, I went to high school with one of the sons. But the crazy thing about it was, here was a family that owned Cuba, and they got overthrown by Fidel Castro. And when they got to the United States, they were going, "What did we see in Cuba? This is great," because people don't really realize until you change locations how good we have it here. And the son of Batista's brother, he was just in awe of what they had here that they didn't have in Cuba, even though their education system is probably better than ours because they just work mostly on reading, writing, and arithmetic, which we don't do anymore. But the Batista family was in awe of what they got when they came here, and they, of course, the United States took them with open arms because of Fidel Castro. But it was amazing to be alive at that time of the transition because I knew the son,
Yeah.
Right.
and it was important. But to his people and to his credit, I think he helped develop stuff because he kept Russia and the United States fighting over who was going to give him the most money.
Mm-hmm.
He was holding them both at bay and said, "Oh, well, the United States will give me this, so Russia would give me more. Well, Russia will give me this, so the United States would." And when we put the embargo against him, he didn't care because he was already in a position where he was one of the wealthiest people there. So, and he still had Russia backing him up because of the location where he was to the United States. So he was smart to say he was a hero or a zero. He was probably a hero to his family and the people that took over the Batista family because the Batistas were trying to bring in casinos and everything else down in that Cuba could make an enterprise out of. And Castro ran the casinos out and took over. So
To the
I don't
detriment
know
of the
how-
mob.
yeah,
That's
I don't know.
Bob, but
I don't know how you would rate him either way, but
they also had a big problem. I mean, really, when you think about it, we almost drove him into the arms of Russia. We boycotted the tobacco, we boycotted the sugar, so he had to sell it somewhere. And of course, Russia was looking to get a foothold in our hemisphere. But besides that, the Dulles brothers under Eisenhower, George Foster Dulles, Allen Dulles, and George Foster Dulles, they had tons of real estate in Cuba
Yeah.
at 5 cents an acre.
Yeah.
And they right away, as soon as he threw them out, they right away, this guy's a communist, he's no good, and money, a lot of money.
Again, money.
Always
Again-
money, a
again,
lot to do with money. I'm not saying Castro was a terrific guy, but he was nobody's fool, that's for sure. We tried to knock him off a few times, and he wasn't,
Yep.
And again, with Kennedy, I don't know, did Castro have something to do with it? I don't know. Who the hell knows?
All right, so we'll move on to Mr. Pace.
I'm just looking at you for your cue. Tell me where you want to go next.
Ready to go?
wait a minute, Mr. Pace is a hero or a zero?
Answer that question.
Well played.
Answer that question.
He is my hero.
Let me start the question like
He is
this.
my hero.
Let me
'Cause
start my.
he's already explained to Rob Carew that I didn't throw Rod out of the game.
Can I start my answer like this?
Hey, Billy, look at my finger.
I can see the one you're holding.
Look at
up.
my
Yeah, I
finger.
know. That's the one with
You
the
know how I
band.
did that? You know how I? Did I tell you how I did
Yeah,
that?
yeah. But it can't.
I think we've.
We've exhausted this.
I think we've worn out this episode, our 100th episode, our third-year anniversary.
We made it a history lesson.
And once more, we have not promoted any of our books. And we've talked about a number of the subjects in Lamar's Gamble. We talked about Kennedy. We talked about Johnson. And we talked about
The mob.
the mob. And we talked about Martin Luther King. So, pick it up. It's a good read.
Yeah, especially if you want to hear about the 60s and 70s and the climate of the 60s and 70s, which made the AFL so palatable for the general public.
Joe West, always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Proud to wear this shirt, brother. Proud.
I said, Billy, wear your Joe West shirt. A text. And what did you say back to me?
I said, I usually reserve that for weddings and special occasions. It's one of my best pieces of wardrobe. Certainly my most expensive.
Yeah.
Once the Christopherson on it, I searched my closet for my cleanest dirty shirt.
My cleanest dirty shirt. That's a great Sunday morning coming down.
Be well, my friend.
Be well,
Talk to you next
Joe.
time.
Good seeing you, pal.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you guys. And Derek, my deepest sympathies.
You held that one in, huh?
Oh, he held it in. All right. Wave
guys.
him off.
Wave him off. There he goes. Quite an athlete. I mean, did you ever have a game where you played scratch? No, not even close. Not even if you got the ball in the cloud's mouth at the end.
No, I shot in the 70s twice.
Did you?
What? 78s.
78 is 78.
And both times I choked. One time I had a 36 on the front nine. I blew up on the back nine because I was thinking about the breaking par. And the other time I had a 44 on the front nine, and then I shot like a 35 or whatever, 30 on the back.
It's nice to be able to say you blew up to a 78, though.
Yeah, well, twice. And how long have I been playing? What am I? 63 years?
I'm 75, Frank, and I want to tell you, I started playing golf when I was like 16. And here I am at 75. I was a terrible golfer when I was 16. Now I'm 75, and now I'm old, and I'm a terrible golfer. Still suck. Anyway, that's our show for today, right?
Yeah, that's our show for today. Well said, Billy.
Well, so that's it. Our show for the day. And since we have Derek,
okay, what's our odds that we're still here this time next year?
Oh, we still on the air or still on the earth? What are we looking? What's the bet here?
Either one.
Well, how about you, Derek? Which one of us is going to die first? That's what I want to know. Throw the bet. Throw the money out.
Wouldn't it be funny if Derek goes first?
Hilarious!
I knew he was going to say this. So I brought it up.
You know what? If Derek goes, we're going to go down and get one of those New Orleans funerals.
Well, you know what? I know if Derek takes his next boat ride with you, the chances are that you two will go first.
But he eats healthy.
I wish Joe West heard that story.
What story?
About me not know where I'm going?
Yes, that's
like
ridiculous.
Columbus, man. If Columbus could do it, I can do it. What do you mean it's ridiculous? You know what the problem is? Everything in California is named Santa something. Something Santa Clara, Santa this, Santa Monica, Santa Cruz, Santa this. I don't know. I'm going to Santa somewhere. What do I know?
It's like the city, Los Angeles. Like the team, the Los Angeles Angels. It's Los Angeles means angels. So the name of the team is the Angels.
The Angels. Yeah. Just get me on a D train and point me somewhere. Yeah. Ship me somewhere east of Suez, where the best is like the worst, where there ain't no 10 commandments and a man can quench his thirst.
Gunga Din?
No, but that's the same guy, Rudyard Kipling. All right, that's it, I guess.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
See you next year.
All right, next year it is.
Next week's guest, actor and magician, Stephen Valentine. We'll see you next week.